Live from WABC New York and across the United States, this is Stand for the Truth with J.R. McGee. To speak with J.R., dial 1-800-848-WABC. Skype users, Truth 97313.
Welcome to another issue of Stand for the Truth Radio. I have to ask, if you're in my audience right now, your primary question should be, why yet another conservative talk radio show? Lord knows there's enough of them out there already, right? It's because I strongly believe that a very large percentage of the world today is hungry for real news, accurate information, powerful insights, and critical analysis of the crucial current events that are happening today, and most importantly, how they're affecting our lives. We instinctually know that we're not getting this from the mainstream news media today. And let's face it, most of us don't have the time or the skills to effectively research the internet to find information or to accurately separate the wheat from the chaff. Let's face it, we're not real analysts. Most of us don't even know how to do those kinds of things. Stand for the Truth exists to provide precisely this type of insight to real-world decision makers just like you. I want to help you understand what's happening. What does it mean? How is it going to affect me? What do I need to do in order to ensure I and my family are safe, secure, and prosperous? I believe with every fiber of my being that my mission is to be a critical resource of information to help you with precisely that in a way that's both understandable and useful. To that end, I want to welcome a very special guest with us today, Mr. James Johnson. James is a retired military intelligence analyst and a respected colleague. He and I worked together in Alaska back in the 1990s when I was program manager of the world's largest, most sophisticated military training facility. And he and I have stayed in very close contact through the years, and he remains a trusted friend and a very, very effective analyst in things that are going on around the world today, and he can help us provide some understanding of what's going on. Welcome to the show, James.
Thank you, JR.
There's a bunch of things going on right now. You know, we've got the shooting in Las Vegas. We've got this issue going on with North Korea. We've got the Republicans and the Democrats that are melting down left and right. Everybody's talking about those things. And while they're important, there's some additional important things that are happening that almost no one is talking about, especially the mainstream media. One of these is last week, the King of Saudi Arabia, King Salman, for the first time in history, a Saudi Arabian monarch visited Moscow. This is huge. It's a ground changer. And in accordance with that meeting, there were several agreements that were made. In addition to that, this week, the Palestinian situation. Hamas signed a critical accord with Fatah. You know, in 2007, these two groups split apart, and Fatah controls the West Bank. Hamas controls the Gaza Strip. And they have not worked together at all. And yet this week, Egypt was able to facilitate an agreement between these two organizations that realign them together. That's enormous. And as if that wasn't enough, the Hezbollah terrorist group has become this week part of the Lebanese army in Lebanon under the control of Iran. These three things are connected. They're huge, and almost no one's talking about those. I would like for us to spend a little bit of time dissecting each of these and figuring out exactly what they mean. Let's start with the Saudi Arabia meeting with Putin in Moscow, James. What do you know about that?
It is pretty low-key. It took a little bit of digging to find out much about it. It's very definitely a game changer that's beginning to occur over there. It's something we can basically lay back at the previous administration in many ways, in the fact that they decided we need to step back from our presence on the world stage and become less of a influence in the world. By doing so, we've created a power vacuum. Saudi Arabia wants allies.
They do. They want somebody who can protect them against Iran in particular. There's two real issues that the King Salman was trying to get from Russia. First and foremost, Russia's not part of OPEC, but Russia is one of the major oil producers in the world, and OPEC desperately needs some type of an alliance with Russia to control the prices of oil, and Russia also needs to prop up those prices of oil. So an alliance between Saudi Arabia and Russia benefits Russia hugely because Russia's entire economy is based upon the price of oil right now. If oil crashed, Russia would not be able to exist as a government. But even more importantly, there was an agreement signed for Saudi Arabia to purchase some major arms from Saudi Arabia, in particular, the S-400 surface-to-air missile system. The Russians call that the Triumph. NATO calls it the SA-21 Growler. It is one of the world's most sophisticated surface-to-air missile systems. And frankly, the United States has been trying to sell THAAD to Saudi Arabia. These two systems are directly competing with each other. What's your perspective on that?
Once again, you're looking at a sea change in the way things have been. Saudi Arabia, for the last umpteen years, has bought their technology and equipment from us. They got the predecessor to THAAD, which is the Patriot system, from us back in the 90s after the first Gulf War. So they're looking at completely changing their military logistics train to something, non-compatible. About the only thing you'll be able to use in common between a Patriot system and the S-400 is the diesel fuel to run the generators.
That's exactly right. And I have to tell you, this to me signals a major shift in one of our crucial allies in the Middle East away from the U.S. sphere of influence, placing the Saudi Arabians into the Russian sphere of influence. To say this is a sea change, I think, is very accurate, but it could be even bigger than that. As the Middle East realigns with Russia as the dominant protectorate in the area, that cuts America more and more out of any role of influence in this region. The world's most unstable region, the world's most volatile players, and we have essentially lost our ability to be influential in that arena. They're buying other weapons as well. They're buying a multiple barrel rocket launch system instead of buying our MLRS. They're buying a lot of equipment instead of buying it from the United States, which they have been since the 1967 war. This is an enormous change, and how it's not being reported in the American news media doesn't surprise me, but it does shock me because this is so important. What does this mean long term?
There's several things that are going to come back from that. One of the simplest is the fact that you don't just buy one of these systems and take it home and put it in your garage. You need support, you need parts, you need upgrades. With these missile systems, you're going to periodically have to replace your missiles, because eventually you shoot them either in training or at a target. There's a constant stream of supplies, training to be involved. You're going to have trainers from the supplier there in your country working with your people.
This also tells me that they're going to now be comfortable with having a constant stream of Soviet advisors in Saudi Arabia. That's a significant commitment moving towards Russia and, again, away from the United States. I don't think people realize the depth and the magnitude that this change indicates.
Once again, that would be part of why the main media is pretty much ignoring it. They don't realize this is more than just buying a new car. This is a complete change in philosophy and linkages and alliances.
And Russia's moving throughout the Middle East and becoming a dominant player, where the United States was the guarantor of security, which maintained peace. Now Russia's beginning to play that role. In fact, Russia, in conjunction with Iran, is moving troops and allowing Iranian troops into the Golan Heights, which is a direct threat to Israel. It's a destabilizing action and not a stabilizing action. Russia said that not only would they allow the Iranians in there, but they're only going to require that the Iranians stay 5 kilometers away from the Israeli border. That's about 2.5 miles, maybe 3 miles. That's really close to have your adversaries sitting right on your border.
With modern systems, that is sitting on the border. You don't have guys sitting there looking through concertina wire coils anymore. You're sitting back a few miles next to your rocket launcher with your computer terminal.
You and I have worked with a lot of these systems, and we understand exactly how dynamic they are. How does this change the security situation for Israel and for the region as a whole?
That is a very interesting question. You need to look at several things. One, Russia has a long-standing relationship with Iran, who is supposedly the reason that Saudi is looking for a new partner, is to hold them up and back them up against Iran. Now you got Russia on both sides of that. And in Russia, if you study a little history and go back especially to the Soviet Union days, they have a long history of stirring the pot, as it were. They like to stir up a little conflict so they can get in the middle of it, get something to their benefit out of it.
And I think you're going to find that Iran is behind an awful lot of this. Russia and Iran have formed a very powerful alliance, and they are maneuvering a lot of these situations to create instability so that they can provide a key element to have other people begin to depend on them. And I also think that they're making some realignments in order to strengthen themselves to attack Israel again in the future. I think that the really important takeaway from this is these are huge developments in the Middle East, and I think that they've got both short-term, mid-term, and long-term implications. This is something we're going to have to pay very close attention to, and I think the average American needs to be much more aware of this, because I'm going to tell you, it's my strong belief the next war in the Middle East is going to be significantly more devastating and more widespread than what we've seen in the past, and it is going to affect us and affect us very strongly. We'll be back right after this.
Stand for the Truth. We'll be right back with J.R. McGee. This is Stand for the Truth with J.R. McGee. To speak with J.R., dial 1-800-848-WABC. Skype users, Truth97313.
Welcome back. This is Stand for the Truth Radio. Our special guest today is James Johnson, a retired military intelligence analyst, and he and I are taking a close look at what's going on in the Middle East this week. There's some major issues that are changing and some realignments that are occurring, and I think it's going to have a dramatic impact on the Americans' lives today. James, let's take a look at the second situation that's going on, and this is between the terrorist group Hamas, which is in control of the Gaza Strip, and Fatah, which is the former terrorist group in control of the West Bank. Since 2007, when they split up because of a military coup, Mohammed Abbas has been the president of Fatah and controlling the West Bank. Hamas has been controlled by several people because Israel has killed some of them. They have been in deep trouble recently. The reason being is because they lost their sponsor. Qatar was a major sponsor financially for Hamas, and because of Donald Trump and the Saudi Arabians, Qatar has come under intense pressure to eliminate its funding and support for terrorist organizations. This is something Donald Trump's not getting any credit for, but has already had a dramatic effect. Talk to us a little bit about the organizations of Fatah and Hamas and what this realignment between the two of them is going to mean for us.
If the realignment holds, they have to keep in the fact that these two have had a history of having their own fights between each other. But if they make it hold, Israel's going to be facing a united front from those two areas. They're both capable, and they both have a history of doing terrorist attacks on civilians. But now they're going to be able to coordinate. They're going to be able to interlink their finances, interlink their equipment, have cohesive leadership. It's going to up the threat to Israel from that entire area very notably.
Is it going to make either of the groups more dangerous?
It really should make them both more dangerous because they'd be able to coordinate. You could have literally an attack going on, and 20 minutes later, by the clock, as first responders are heading to one side of town, you hit the other side of town. You do that kind of coordination, and you can up your results a lot just from the fact that there's no good opposition.
And there's a lot of people that are scrambling, trying to get out in front of this organization, in front of this situation. Turkey actually tried to do some overtures toward Hamas to become a sponsor, but Egypt, El-Sisi, the president of Egypt, was the one who was able to sit down and negotiate this new deal. And here's an interesting thing about the deal. It was signed. There's some major changes in this. The Rafah Gate is going to be transferred over to El Fatah. They're not transferring it directly to Mohammed Abbas. What they're doing is they're transitioning it to Egypt, and then Egypt is transitioning it to Fatah. I thought that was very interesting in how they're setting that up. It tells me that this alignment is more financial than it is operational. And to back that up, one of the things that's not part of this new agreement is that Hamas is refusing to turn over military control of either their warriors or their equipment to Fatah. They're fighting to maintain control of the military wing of Hamas. At the same time, they're trying to transition the administrative portion of Hamas so that people get paid, people get fed, and the electric grid stays on. It tells me that this is not necessarily as strategic as it is tactical. It's to maintain the facade that things are okay. What's your perspective on that?
I think that goes back to one of the points I brought up at first, is they have a history of butting heads together on their own. They're definitely going in the same direction, but they're not quite ready to link arms and be completely united. Still a little bit of a crack that can be used to work between them if you're able.
I think you're exactly right. That's a powerful point, too. If you've studied Islam, and I have, I was in counterterrorism for 33 years, there's two things about Islamists that are predictable. First and foremost, they always follow the strong horse. They're always going to go with who they think the strongest player is, who has the highest potential for winning. That's a dominant characteristic in their behavior. Second, they have a very strong issue, and they have a saying that goes with that. I and my brother will fight. My brother and I will fight our cousin. My brother and my cousin will fight the stranger. There's a hierarchy to how they fight, but they're always fighting somebody. So I'm not sure that this realignment is the peaceful initiative that some people are trying to make it out to be.
I think you're right there. I think you may see, if they get to where they can at least coordinate with each other, you may see a little more coordination between the two sides, but I don't think they're ever going to be completely buddy-buddy with each other. They're still going to have slightly divergent goals. They do all have that one overall outstanding target, get rid of Israel, but beyond that, they're out for themselves.
What should we be looking for in the coming days in terms of insight and information that can tell us where this is heading and what it means?
The key thing to be looking for would be where key players on both sides end up moving to and what positions they start taking over.
And what would that look like? There's so much turmoil and they fight with each other. There's so many players moving around. What would that look like? How would the average American know that something significant has taken place within the leadership of these two organizations?
That's going to be hard to say at this point. Probably the easiest thing to do is when you start finding one voice that's speaking for both sides of the fence again. You know, somebody is issuing the demands to Israel on behalf of both or behalf of whatever the new name they adapt to is. Be the other thing if they begin merging into a new organization.
I think you're right on target with that. And what I'm looking for is it would be very significant to me as a result of this realignment, they announced new elections. Mahmoud Abbas was elected for El Fatah, and then as soon as his term ended, he scrubbed all future elections. And their saying was one vote, one person, one time. So democracy really hasn't set in over there. I think that a major issue to look for in this, something that would be really critical, is if they announced that they were going to have elections, because the elections would then indicate who they're going to put in control of this new organization and how that's going to line out. So I'm going to be paying close attention to see, are they going to have elections or are they going to shift members? And is Hamas going to actually integrate with Fatah? If there's an integration, I think that's also crucial. There's something to remember about all this, and there's one more aspect that we want to take a look at very quickly, and that is Hamas is generally Sunni. And the Sunnis, really, Hamas was generated by the Islamic Brotherhood. Iran has not had much control over those organizations in the past, but Iran is very much trying to become integrated with Hamas. That's another element that we want to take a close look at. Stand for the Truth Radio. We'll come back right after this crucial commercial break.
Stand for the Truth. We'll be right back with J.R. McGee. This is Stand for the Truth with J.R. McGee. To speak with J.R., dial 1-800-848-WABC. Skype users, Truth97313.
This is Stand for the Truth Radio with J.R. McGee with our special guest, James Johnson, a retired military intelligence analyst. We're talking about recent events in the Middle East, crucial events, things that are going to have a major impact on us and the security and safety of the world, and yet they're virtually unknown to the mainstream media. We want to take a look at another element that's happening at the same time this past week, and that is with Hezbollah, another one of the terrorist groups. Hezbollah is Shia Islam. They are heavily involved in Lebanon. They are directly controlled, funded, trained, and supported by Iran. Lebanon, their prime minister, just this week announced that Hezbollah was a critical portion of the government and a part of the military and was a guarantee of the security for Lebanon. This is a major shift because for many years, Lebanon has fought Hezbollah. They've fought many military engagements against Hezbollah. And now all of a sudden, Hezbollah is part of the Lebanese military. James, tell us a little bit about your perspective on Hezbollah and what this might mean.
Hezbollah is one of those interesting organizations on paper that goes everywhere from being a bit player army for a small country to being a major terrorist, back to almost looking like a real army. Kind of depends on who's running the show and what they're doing. But they're large enough and well-funded enough with Iran behind them that no matter which way they're playing, they're a valid threat. They're willing to do almost anything to accomplish their goal.
Hezbollah recently committed a large number of troops into Syria to help sustain the government of Assad in Syria. That's directly in conflict with what the United States has been doing and Turkey and some of the other players over there. How does that all play out, and how has that affected Hezbollah?
Giving them a bigger footprint on the stage to play with, and the fact that Hezbollah is pretty much a proxy of Iran means Iran is getting more influence and access to these areas. All of those, once again, are anti-Israeli features and groups. So they're all having, chance to work together. While they may not be perfectly friendly, there's some things here that Lebanese, at least on the political side, are denying that they're completely integrated. But you look at realistically and what they're doing, they're probably fairly well integrated in those areas now. In all of it, you have a force that has a pretty good backing, at least monetarily and equipment-wise, from Iran. It wasn't that long ago where Israel used their aircraft to take out what was supposed to be an arms shipment en route to Hezbollah that may have even included ballistic missiles. That's some pretty serious weaponry. That's above the level of a grenade launcher or another AK-47 clone.
That's exactly right. And Israel has made several strikes against some of the Hezbollah positions, to include some suspected chemical weapons factories. As Hezbollah gains this experience, how can they use that in integrating with the Lebanese army, and what does that mean for Israel and the region in general in terms of security?
Biggest thing it means is as these groups get the experience and learn to work together, they become a more effective military force. That's the place where the U.S. Army excels so much in this part of the world, is everybody goes in with the same goal in mind. They work together, even though they're all doing different jobs. They're not fighting among the unit. It's a cohesive front. That has been an area where that part of the world has been notoriously poor in the past. But as they all learn to work together as a military unit, they're going to be able to present a much more organized, more valid threat to Israel.
As I look at all of this, I see a pattern in this. Hezbollah, Iran, and Russia have been moving out of Syria into the Golan Heights, which is adjacent to Syria. And they've been establishing a major military presence on the Golan Heights, which overlook a majority of Israel. How is that going to affect this situation? Because the average American doesn't know where the Golan Heights are, and they don't even know who these players are. So when we say that, it doesn't necessarily mean something to everybody. Help our listeners understand who these players really are and how this alignment and especially this repositioning into the Golan Heights, help us understand how that dramatically affects the security situation.
Basically, the name of the place gives away a lot of it. It's Golan Heights. It's the highest point in the area, which gives whoever's sitting on top of it a commanding view. They can see a large part of Israel from the top of those hills, which means you can't move equipment or men or weapon systems without potentially being seen. They have line of sight to listen to your radio. They have line of sight to shoot at you. And if they're arming that area up, putting more modern equipment and more manpower up there, the threat goes up very high.
So what I'm hearing you say is they can be putting listening posts and intelligence gathering equipment up there that gives them a better sense of what's going on and allows them to prepare better?
You can sit up there, with something as simple as, a couple of radio scanners and a decent mail-order telescope and see a lot of what's going on in Israel. If you just sit there and take pictures of the military bases twice a day, how many tanks are parked in the parking lot? What are the guys drilling out on the field doing? Just being able to look at the guys, you can get a lot of good information.
That gives a whole new perspective to why Israel is so upset over this. The Israeli Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman also said on October the 10th, just 2 days ago, whoever wants peace must prepare for war. And I hope that our enemies on the other side will think carefully about every step taken against the state of Israel. He said that in direct response to this activity on the Golan Heights and the integration of Hezbollah into the Lebanese army. What do you think Israel is going to do in response to all this?
Looking at history, Israel has never had a particular patience for just sitting there and letting their enemies do whatever they want and prepare to attack Israel. Israel has a pretty decent history of making a preemptive move to protect their own interests.
So you think that this is destabilizing activity?
I believe it is. Israel is a small country. Any one of these nice northeastern states in New England have a bigger footprint in reality on the ground than Israel does.
Israel's actually
tiny.
Slightly smaller than the state of New Jersey. So that gives you perspective of what they have to defend. Well, there you have it. Saudi Arabia is moving into the sphere of Russia. Hezbollah is moving into the sphere even more tightly with Iran, Russia, and Lebanon. And Hamas is moving possibly into the sphere of Iran, actually taking steps that will destabilize the region greatly in the coming days. I think all of these are related. I think it's integrated, and I think it's critically important. So stay with us. We'll be right back right after this.
Stand for the Truth. We'll be right back with J.R. McGee. This is Stand for the Truth with J.R. McGee. To speak with J.R., dial 1-800-848-WABC. Skype users, Truth 97313.
Welcome back to Stand for the Truth. We're going to take some calls from our callers. We've got Charles from Cambridge, England. Charles, welcome to the show.
Thank you, JR. Hey, I'm really enjoying this. My question revolves back to Saudi buying Russian arms. I think I've seen that Turkey has also started moving their alliances over to Russian arms. Who else is looking at non-NATO equipment? And what does all that mean? And how are we going to deal with that?
That's a great question. James, what's your perspective on that, sir?
In that part of the world, almost anybody will look at whatever's available. As expensive as modern weapons are, they're going to look at pricing. That's really what it comes down to. Who's going to give them the best deal? And that's more than just the initial pile of equipment. There's a train of technical support and parts and upgrades that go along with that. So who's willing to support the whole thing? The other part of it is, as JR kind of alluded to, with the I'll fight with my brother and my brother and I will fight with my cousin thing. In the Arab mindset, who's bigger and stronger still counts a lot. And unfortunately, due to the previous 8 years, we've lost a lot of our gravitas, to use an overbeaten word, in that part of the world. And our current leadership is so wrapped up in the current political infighting that they're really not making any inroads to undoing that damage yet. Everybody from the outside is looking at it, and all they're seeing is the Twitter war.
In addition to Turkey buying the S-400 system, you've got Egypt, and Obama specifically forbid Egypt from purchasing military weapons when El-Sisi took over the presidency from the Muslim Brotherhood. They're going to be looking for someone who can provide them with weapons. So I expect to see Egypt signing some major arms agreements with Russia as well. That once again solidifies the fact that we're moving further and further away from the U.S. sphere of influence in the Middle East. Ken, where are you from?
I am from Collegeville, but I'm calling from Reading, PA. First, let me just say I'm really enjoying the program today, and I know time is short, so I'll get right to it. Do either of you see any way to counter this move towards an alliance between Russia and Saudi Arabia?
James, I'll let you take that first, sir.
A lot of it comes down to how we're perceived in that part of the world. Kind of goes back to my previous answer to the previous caller. Until they see us as, once again, being a world-class power and able to be there for their security and give them backing when they need it, they're going to be looking for somebody who's going to give them that sense of security. We have to do something to bring our prestige back in the rest of the world, and right now we're not really fixing that.
What I've seen both through my career and what I'm seeing today is people in the Middle East are looking for a strong leader. They're looking for someone who can provide security, protection, and most of all, someone who's predictable. The previous administration was none of those things. They were not leaders, they were not providing security, and they were very unpredictable. I think one of the things that the Trump administration could do, and I think they are trying to do, is display strong leadership, take decisive action, and ensure people that we will be there to protect them. I think there's no question in anybody's mind who is still the dominant superpower in the world today, and that's the United States and the United States military. What people have lost is confidence in the fact that we know how to use that military effectively. If we can overcome that perception, I think we may be able to recover this. However, the Department of State under Hillary Clinton infuriated the Saudi Arabians and the Egyptians, and to no small measure, the King of Jordan. That is a major root cause for why some of these transitions have been taking place. And I think that that's going to be difficult to overcome. But nothing succeeds like action. And one thing we're seeing out of Trump is he's not afraid of action. Okay, we've got Jeannie in Prattville, Alabama. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Excellent information. Really enjoying all of this. And my question is this: are there other signs that Saudi Arabia is moving away from their relationship with the United States?
James?
There are other small signs. They're kind of in the weeds, but you're going to see it primarily on two fronts. One of them is, as we've been talking here, the military alliance. The other one is on the OPEC side. Russia's economy is heavily based on oil. Saudi Arabia's is only based on oil. That's about the only thing that comes out of Saudi Arabia that anybody else in the world's really interested in. So Saudi's number one concern is keeping the price of oil up high enough to fund everything else they do. Watch who they're having meetings with on oil prices and oil production. The other thing to be aware of with Russia taking up influence with both Saudi and Iran is that gives them somebody who's working with them on both sides of that particular waterway that the oil flows out of so much.
And you know, King Solomon is brand new on the throne in Saudi Arabia, and he's already making major changes. In fact, in the last week, they've given women the right to drive. We're seeing some major societal changes in Saudi Arabia. We're seeing major financial changes in Saudi Arabia. They're trying to take steps to move their economy away from being a dominantly oil-based economy to being a demand-based economy. So we are seeing steps, Jeannie, that we should be paying attention to. And that tells me that this is not just one temper tantrum. This is a major decision that's been made at the highest levels of Saudi Arabia and for those under the sphere of influence of Saudi Arabia to move in a completely different direction. And I think we have to pay very close attention to. That brings us up to our next station break.
Stand for the Truth. We'll be right back with J.R. McGee. This is Stand for the Truth with J.R. McGee. To speak with J.R., dial 1-800-848-WABC. Skype users, Truth97313.
Welcome back. Our next caller is Jeannie.
Thank you. Really enjoyed the show, but I have some questions. Yes. I'm not completely convinced that there's this tight relationship between Russia and Saudi Arabia right now. What is to prevent Saudi Arabia from sharing the missile technology that they have purchased from Russia with the United States, who's for decades been their ally?
That is the $64,000 question, Jeannie. James, why don't you take first crack at that, my friend?
Okay, some of that's going to be depending on how their treaty or agreement is worded, but in reality, really there's not much if they want to let our guys come in and play with the toys that says they can't because it'll be on their base under their control. Couple things to keep in mind, going back once again to the old Soviet Union days, on technology of that level, there's quite often an export and a home version, as it were. So what Saudi Arabia is getting may not be the top of the line. What they're getting may not be complete yet. They may be a few software upgrades away from being fully operational, just in case they do decide to back out. But the other thing in there, as JR mentioned before, is the fact that we have a completely new, basically ruling organization in Saudi Arabia after the passing of King Abdullah. Everybody there is feeling out what they're going to do. Now they're cozying up to Russia, thinking they're getting a better deal. But we'll just have to see what happens. JR?
I think there's very significant truth in that. And there has been a long-standing 40-plus year relationship with the United States, both militarily, economically, and culturally with Saudi Arabia. That's not going to change overnight. It's going to take time for Saudi Arabia to move in a different direction. Nothing of this magnitude happens by changing on a dime. But what we are seeing are major shifts in a different direction. It may simply be a wake-up call to the United States to pay attention or we will lose you, or it may be that the decision's already been made. I tend to think it's the latter, but there may be things that we can do and that Donald Trump can do as President of the United States to reestablish that relationship. I pray that they do, because Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Egypt are too central to the stability of the Middle East for us to allow those relationships to just vanish without a fight. So there you have it. Saudi Arabia is making moves towards Russia. Hamas is integrating with Fatah in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. And Hamas and Hezbollah is integrating with the Lebanese army. These are major, major issues that have a direct impact on the security both of Israel and the Middle East as a whole. What do you, as a rational decision maker, need to do with this information to make sure you secure your family? Pay attention. Follow the news. Don't just trust the mainstream media. Begin to learn to use the internet. Begin to search for information. And stay with Stand for the Truth Radio. One of the things I'm going to be trying to do with Stand for the Truth Radio is to help my listeners learn how to find accurate information, how to do the analysis for that information, how to determine what's propaganda and what's real. And last but not least, and certainly I think the most important, how to make good decisions so that you know when to react and when to ignore, when to prepare and when to pursue. What do you do and how do you do it so that you and your family are safe, secure, and prosperous? God bless, and keep paying attention.
Stand for the Truth Radio.